Welcome everybody, and this is our last and final session of the Global Fashioning Assembly, and we're incredibly excited and delighted to have Awamaki in the room, and so yeah, thank you. Over to you, Kennedy and Mandish.
So we're just going to play an intro video, which will give you context about the work that our organization is doing in the Sacred Valley, specifically the Paracancha Valley in Peru. So Natalie, if you can start sharing, please.
She needs to put her sound on. She's muted.
Sorry about that. Okay. I will restart. Here we go.
Puede haber difícil para los niños cuando pueden ser profesionales o se pueden ir de acá de la comunidad, regresan con otra mentalidad, puede ser, ¿no? Pero más debilidad sería que nuestras autoridades distintas son de tambo, de provincia, de región, que nunca lo ven en nuestra cultura y nunca nos apoyan, ¿no? Y por ahí yo pienso, creo que se puede perder la cultura que nosotros que tenemos, ¿no?
Que te gustaban tías paico, limpio, airico, natural. Y cheman que animal callan animal po lanant pushkeipo, awai tijico, natural darwaico.
If you think about what this craft really is, it's not just weaving, it's a cultural identity. Because these communities were living next to alpacas, because these communities were living in a very cold weather, and the only way to be able to clothe themselves was to weave with the materials they had. So when Awamaki works with the craft of weaving, they are connecting to these communities through something that is extremely close to their cultural identities.
Ellos siempre han interpretado de esta forma el río. Ve que hay una dualidad entre lo moderno y lo antiguo. Vas a poder observar la llama, el cóndor, acá está el conejo, las aves. Entonces son diseños de ellas. No rompemos su identidad cultural, respetamos su identidad cultural porque trabajamos con grupos de mujeres que tienen la oportunidad de tener una ventana económica a través de Awamaki y siempre el dinero que ellos reciben de Awamaki es para que puedan continuar estudiando sus hijos, ¿no? No, normalmente ni bajo el
Imatapas ruwakuytapunin q'ablata yachanaykichiywan vida pasanaykipaq. Mana imatapas ruwayta yachaspaykiqa mana hayk'aqpas maypipis allin kawaqchu. Chaymanta nuqayku hatarispayku mamakunallara hatariyku ñawpaqta hinasqa listuta desayunuta ruwayku sopantinta desayununtinta. Chayqa escuelaman wawayku achapunayku listuta preparayku las 6 ya está listuña mikhuna. 3 días como quiera con mana chi letra no tres con tiempo con echa letra de snaga con traik na pas escola mucho na colegio ma escola to cursos colegio ma chi manda gas lachtalar universidad chi ma chi kuna ben estudiando chi o con apa importante no caray que peña o saque eric to
Hay mucha gente que nos margina por lo que no tenemos profesionales, ¿no? Campesinos a un lado, los profesionales acá sentados. Eso es lo que no me gusta. Entonces, bueno, para mí es importante que se están preparando los niños, ¿no?
Piensa ya en que estudiar que estudian estudias técnico y alpaca o agricultor o negocio. No capaikunata requito manani hamo unchaykunaman manaña no paykunañachu aswanqa más daña paykuna estudianankuta mana ki culturaykuta p'achakusqayku chinkachinankuta munaykumanchis nuqa astawan paykuna proteginankuta y paykuna astawan más conocimiento yachanankuta. Kunay tiempo mana kaqchu. Kunay tiempo mana 20 kilos imapas tanto chukaq. Ari que qhipa watakunaman michaqa kanmi imapaqmi ima nuqapas ari llanka kutiqikunahinas ki oran haykuspa ichaqa llanka kuspaq 20 kunapas imachapaqpas actividadtaqmi llankanaypaq.
Thank you, Natalie.
Yeah, no problem.
So that is a bit of context about Awamaki. Kennedy, would you like to expand at all before we show the tour video? You're on mute.
Yes, that was a video we made maybe like 5 years ago. As you can maybe gather from the video, we work with Quechua artisans. We work with women who are organized, who organize themselves into cooperatives. So we work with women's cooperative businesses. And our goal is to offer market opportunity and also offer the kind of skills training and resources that they need to to connect with more markets and to connect with international markets. Another part of our work is to bring tourists to their villages so that they can host tourism and share their culture and sell their work directly to tourists. So what we really believe is that income in the hands of women is the best way to empower communities, because women know what their communities need. And we work with about 160 artisans, and they are incredibly skilled in many fiber arts, from shearing and spinning to weaving on the backstrap loom and knitting. And our goal really is to just connect them with to collaborate with them, really to design programs that connect them to market opportunities. Yeah. So then I mentioned that we do some tourism, and we bring tourists up to the villages so that they can, the artisans can show them their work and their culture and their craft. And so we had, for this session, we had a filmmaker accompany our tourism coordinator and go up and kind of take the tour and let the artisans, we really wanted to find a way to let the artisans kind of host this and be the voice in this. And so we had them kind of host and explain their work and work with our tourism coordinator to do that. So that's the video that you're about to see.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to share my screen.
Alpaca, Vilma de alpaca. Alpaca crecemos de altura, estancia. Sí.
So she has alpaca here that she's showing, and this grows. The alpacas are all being raised up higher, much higher than here.
Alpaca altos colores. Este color.
These are all natural colors that come from the alpaca. Yeah, for sure. All in the alpaca.
Altos colores, hay alturas, estancias, sí.
¿Cuántos colores hay?
No necesita tenido, no. Así hilamos, no necesitamos tener, sí.
So they use all of these because the raw colors that they are, they would never dye any color any natural color.
12 colores, 13 colores, según color, sí.
So there's about 12
sí. Escalamos un año, 2 años, así, escalamos. Cortamos.
Okay.
Sí.
Un año crece.
Un año,
So
2 años,
like,
sí, según crecemos de pelo.
Okay.
Sí.
So this is they usually cut the fiber every year or so. Okay. Wow.
Sí. Pasamos oveja.
So
Pasamos 2 colores oveja.
So we have the 2 colors of sheep wool here.
Sí, disculpe. Enero, febrero escalamos de alpaca.
Enero, febrero.
Cortamos.
Okay. So in January, February is when they usually cut the wool of the alpaca.
Sí. Crecemos chiquititos, pequeñitos de alpaca. Crecemos enero, febrero crecemos una alpaquita. Más rápido.
Okay.
Sí. Ya pasamos oveja. Pasamos oveja.
Y los
sí.
2 colores.
2 colores.
Okay.
Blanco y negro.
Okay.
Sí.
no igual es alpaca.
Yeah, you can tell the difference in the texture, of course.
Sí. Sí. No es igual, es alpaca.
No,
sí.
it's not the same.
De Chaimanta,
Después tenemos
helamos de oveja, después a tener.
So they spin the wool here, and then after that they'll dye it.
Ya estamos ya
Okay,
casi
so
tener.
that is ready to be
Después.
like what they do here. Yep, exactly. So that's the spinning, and then those are ready to be dyed.
Colle estamos este color, sacamos.
Amarillo.
Yeah, so from this plant here, which is kuyi, you get this yellow. You can get this yellow color from the flowers. Y crece acá.
Sí, crecemos.
And it's one of the local flowers here.
Sí.
But she said they would not dye the naturally colored, so they would only color those
Only
ones.
from the natural white. Yep.
From the natural white.
And that is actually
No,
this is
esto,
great.
sí.
This is the natural.
Sí.
This they would dye and the rest not.
Okay.
Helamos después hace colores estos amarilla, después tenemos 3 colores, 2 colores saca.
De koyi.
Sí, colle.
Y mezclas con los minerales.
Sí,
Okay.
sacamos. Primera esto, segunda, último. Sí.
¿Y usas como culpa o qué?
No culpa, osas, nada.
Ah,
no
no,
necesitamos
no
culpa,
necesitamos.
ni nada. Ni,
No mineral.
sí,
Okay.
No, nada.
So these are just from just the batches of koyi dye that you don't have to mix it. Some of the other dyes you have to mix with some of the minerals here that they'll show.
Yeah.
But this is all just from the plant.
Este color chilca. Sacamos verde.
This is chilca, another
Ajá,
plant from
crece.
here.
Crece. Así. Acá. Después está olla a entrar, sacamos verde.
¿Está en la olla?
Sí.
Okay.
Está hierro, ya está hirviendo. Ya.
So they're actually boiling some of this plant right over there over by the fire. So that's kind of what you smell a little bit of in order to get it ready to be dyed.
Sacamos más clarito. Es segunda. Es tercera.
Okay.
Sí, sacamos.
Y con
necesitamos culpa.
Okay. Culpa para hacerlo más oscuro.
Más oscuro, más claro.
So you get the mix with the darker yarn here that has been mixed with the. ¿Puede mostrarme la culpa que usas? Yeah.
Crecen es roca.
Yeah.
Sí, roca nomás.
Just the stones or?
¿Y crece? ¿Dónde crece?
Roca es
De
altura.
alturas? Okay.
Sí.
So it goes a little bit higher and y es una roca de
es montaña. Sí,
Okay.
montaña.
Okay, saques de las montañas.
Otras comunidades también.
It's like chalk.
Yeah.
También cochinilla.
There we have
Sacamos
the
estos colores, hartos colores.
many colors.
Todos colores, hartos colores.
¿Cuáles? Los morados y cuáles son
de tiris, de flor.
Okay, pero de cochinilla, ¿cuáles colores que tienes?
Cochinilla está
Cochinilla acá.
Sí.
15 colores.
Sí, hartos colores cochinilla. Hartos colores.
So depending on how you mix with the minerals and whatnot.
también otros tipos de fijadores.
No tienen fácil el
Hartos. Sí, hartos.
Cantidad de
Cantidad
sí,
de flores.
yeah. You
Necesitan
need a ton of flour in order to achieve that blue. You need a ton of that blue flour in order to get. Yeah.
Este es de flor de labrar. Este es, acá esta es labran árbol es. Sí.
So we have
Sacamos
this
color.
this tree that grows here, and then we get that orange color from that.
Casi igual.
Yeah.
Krass, ne?
Es de verlo. Hervir. Casi una hora hacemos hervir esto. Ajá,
You have to,
sí.
so you have to
Después
boil the
sacamos
tree for about a year. A
Sí.
year, an hour.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Sí, cochinilla falta hartos colores. Casi 25 colores, 12 colores, así 15 colores sacan.
25?
Sí, según estos materiales saca.
Okay, so you can get about 25 different colors from the cochinilla. Depending on how you mix it, you can also mix it with other plants as well.
Piedra al hombre.
We have some more minerals here.
Sacamos otro color.
Yeah. See, they're gonna show kind of. This is dried. This is a dried beetle right here. So you know this. It grows on the prickly pear cactus. You can see like white clumps in it. And so this is dried, and then you grind it. And they're showing they're adding water, and they'll see. You can see how bright the color is.
Este color parece.
Yeah.
Sí.
And then she'll add a little bit of salt.
Más claro.
It's going to become a lot brighter. Yeah, so you can get that bright red color.
Sacamos otro color.
Wow.
Parecer este.
Yeah.
Sí.
Y para pinta uñas o
Sí.
para los
Sí.
So you can use it to paint your nails, or you can use it as makeup.
Yeah. And how many times can you wash it? I mean, is it sustainable, the dyeing, or will the color
will
vanish?
eventually, the color will eventually vanish, which is why you can see in this show when they start to show the graphics that a lot of the things that the textiles that they use are synthetic dye.
Esto
Nowadays.
10 años, 8 años ya aprendimos.
Para
Sí.
8 10
aprendimos.
años,
6 años, 7 años, ya estoy aprendiendo. Poco a
como
poco, poco a poco.
Yeah.
Sí.
You learn 6, 7, 8 years old how to spin yarn, and then from there you learn how to weave.
Wow. At the age of 6.
Yeah, 6 you start, 8 you start to weave like yeah. Yeah, so they're going to show you how to spin with the pushka, which is the word for drop spindle in Quechua. Sí. ¿Tienen 3? Okay. Okay, si quieren aprender. Yeah, sí. Okay, I'm going to move.
Trabajamos. Izquierda,
¿A la izquierda? A la derecha. Okay. Okay, to the right. Okay.
Así. Suelta así. Así. Así.
Looks very simple.
Mira. Así.
Pretty sure it isn't.
Más grande.
Aquí más atrás.
Así.
Otro más.
Se mueve.
See? Okay. See?
Mira.
Okay. Okay. See?
Sí.
Así.
Ah, that's a special.
Despacio nomás.
See?
Sí, despacio. Sí, poco a poco, poco a poco. Sí, así. Ya está.
See this?
Sí.
That right direction?
Está bien.
See?
Poco a poco, despacio. Ya, así. Sí, sí. Está bien, no, está bien.
Sí.
Así, ya está.
Okay. Zur Seite, das sieht einfach aus. Das ist, ne? Tienes 20 años para aprender.
7 años. 6 años.
Sí. Entiendo. ¿Es okay?
Sí.
Sí.
Despacio, 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 así. Sí, con despacio. Ya. Nos movimos. Está bien. Está bien.
Schaut mal so, als hättet ihr es verstanden. Boah, das hält sich mal wieder aus. See? See, you're talented. Okay. Oh, c'est joli. ¿Sí?
Sí.
¿Cómo se repare? ¿Reparex? C'est comme que c'est zu dünn, ne? Ja. Ja. ¿Sí? ¿Está bien? ¿Está bien? ¿No? Ah,
Ya está, ya es chiquitito.
sí. Ja, das ist schwer.
Está bien, está
¿Sí?
bien. Sí, sí.
Okay. Vom Berg runtergetanzt sind. Also die waren zwei Mädels hier tief am Tanzen. Und die beiden haben die ganze Zeit gequatscht.
they're gonna add the yarns to they have chica a la derecha.
Oye,
So they have the green leaves that's dying, that's been boiling. ¿Cuánto tiempo? Como 20 minutos.
20 minutos, 30 minutos, sí, a ver. Sí.
So they've been boiling these plants for 20 minutes. On the other side, they have the pui, which is the orange plant.
Sí.
Yeah, the orange plant.
Entramos. Después sacamos. Sí.
For the video. Oh, sorry.
Ay.
Ya entramos todo. No necesitamos fijador.
No,
Así,
como
así hervido.
Oh,
Sí.
nada, okay.
Nada.
So this is just the straight flour, and none of the minerals will be mixed with it. So vas a dejarlo como 20 minutos.
20 minutos, sí.
Okay, so they're gonna leave it 20 minutes to die.
Sí.
And then I think you have also will the color stay forever? Is it just washing or?
So it does eventually lose out the color of it, and that's why, like for example, the blankets and stuff that they use is all out of synthetic and synthetic stuff. They're using it so much. Generally, what they're selling people for like table runners and things, you know, you're not washing it like you're washing your clothes, right? You're using it as more decorating. So it does eventually.
I wish my kids do not look like that.
So, and then we
Después
have
chica. Sí, sacamos verde.
okay, so we're gonna
Sí.
get green from dyeing and with this green plant. This will show which we're gonna add the mineral later. Okay. You can see the color now. This is how it changes once we add some of the mineral.
Sacamos falta. Falta fijador.
Okay.
Ya sacamos y hasta ahí.
Wow.
Sí.
That is a good one.
Ya, todo sacamos, todo entramos con la olla. Sí. Ya. Sí, 20 minutos igual. Sí, hervir. Sí.
Y después los lava con
Sí, ya, todo ya.
los vas a dejar para secar.
No.
Ay, es más tarde.
Sí.
Y lo vas a polvar y
Ajá. Voy a hervir 20 minutos.
Yep, okay, so we're gonna leave that and take it out later.
Right.
¿Al tela?
Sí.
Okay.
Pulsera.
Ah,
Van, agua. Agua.
and yeah, and she'll show how she'll do it. Yep. So she's bringing up the other side with those. Of the
Charo
cross.
selva.
Ah, so that's from the jungle. And then-
Tocoro igual selva.
Ah, yeah, so that's another selva, another,
No crece acá.
no, so another wood from the jungle, those two at the top there. So yeah, so she beats it down with that wood,
Wow.
and then she'll have to go and take the hook that she has and lift up each individual thread that she wants to be exposed in the design.
Ah, okay, that's like all the pattern.
Yeah, yeah.
Amaral es otro tipo, así igualito.
Ah, okay, so those are the same words?
Amaral es
To tie.
Awatan es alpaca.
Ah, okay. And then they used to tie. This is very traditional. It's a braid that is used in weaving to tie the loom anywhere. So that's from alpaca. Natural colors. ¿Cuánto tiempo falta para terminar?
Terminar un mes.
Ah, okay, so about a month left to finish it.
About a month to finish this piece.
Yeah. And she has already had, you can see, rolled underneath. You can see what has been already done.
Pasamos montar.
Okay, so now they're going to show the blanket that they use to carry everything.
Así tejimos.
Okay.
Así tejimos cabeza. Sí, cabeza. Dos.
Primero así. All of your designs are from memory.
Primero hacen otro, así un lado. Segunda hacen un lado.
So you have two sides here, and you can see in the middle it's been joined by some embroidery.
Okay.
Because you can only weave your width, you know.
But this is synthetic colors again, right?
Yes, synthetic.
The orange, I guess, is too bright.
Yeah, and it also is just because these colors won't fade over time. So, yeah.
Los pájaros.
Y
los pájaros en silva.
De la selva. So they have many different birds.
Un grande pájaros. Pájaro de silva, un grande.
It's a bird from the jungle.
Es mono.
And
yeah, we have a
mono is? Okay, monkey.
Gallina es.
We have a chicken.
De gallina. De fraile.
Mariposa?
Mariposa.
So you have a butterfly.
Vizcacha también.
Okay, so that's. Have you ever seen any of those? They're like this animal around the mountain that has like this long tail, but it looks kind of like a bunny a little bit. Pato?
I think we have been told about it.
Yeah.
And we saw it from a very distance. Yeah, once. Yes, once.
But
we haven't been paying enough attention. I think we have been more.
Es de puma.
You have a puma.
Puma es para montaña salvaje.
Where's the snake?
Serpiente.
Serpiente, no es serpiente.
Condor. Condor we are looking for.
But I can also see an elephant. Why an elephant?
Toco. También.
Hi. So that was the end of the video. Sorry, that was a little abrupt. I think there's been a lot of questions in the chat. So now we're going to open it up to a Q&A. And like Kennedy mentioned earlier as well, that, we really work with these women so that they can tell their story. And that's the heart of the values that we carry at Awamaki. So if, and I see that there's a lot of questions about the dress of the women. Kennedy, would you like to expand on that?
Yes. When I first met my husband, I was showing him pictures of our work in the Andes, and he was like, "Why do you make the women wear those costumes?" And I had to explain that actually this is like just what they wear every day. This is like their traditional clothing. And it's not something that we obviously like would tell them to do, but it's a choice that they make and continue to make, even though, now Western clothing is very readily available. Many of their children and frequently their spouses wear Western clothing, and they only dress up in traditional clothing for special occasions, or maybe if they're going to come down to town. Most of the women still wear traditional dress. I will say in this video, they are wearing their very best traditional dress. And so you can tell like by the orange bands on their skirts, or by the beading that a lot of people were noticing is incredibly intricate. And so that's something that might not be, they might just have a plain woven strap for like everyday use. But the dress is a really important part of their cultural identity. And all of the designs that you're seeing in the beading and on the weavings are for the most part traditional designs that they have carried forward through generations. But you also see a lot of newer designs or things that they've seen in books or read about, or seen on television. And so that you can see kind of an interesting mix there. Yeah, it's one of the things that people comment on the most when they see these images, and it's something that the artisans are really protective. They're really proud of their dress, and they're also really protective of their image. And they can be wary of people wanting to take their photo because they see their images commercialized and sold across Peru without their communities always benefiting. So that is, yeah, there's a lot to talk about there. I'm happy to try to answer any questions. That's something that they hold really, really dear and are very protective of.
Yeah, and I think we had a conversation not long ago about how, as development happens, should the artisans keep wearing their dress or not for the tours? And that's been kind of a challenge as well, because obviously tourists, when they come, they love seeing the women dressed up in their traditional dress. But if that's not what they want to wear, they should also have that choice, right?
Yeah, and that's true of not just their dress, but a lot of things. Like with, I see a question with education, comes shifts in the culture. That's true. And that's also true of income. So like directly as a result of hosting tourists in their like traditional villages, the artisans are able to like build a new house out of concrete blocks and put a tile roof on it, which is not what the traditional mud, rock, thatch architecture looks like. And then they're changing the look of the village. And are they making it less of a tourist attraction? Are they making, are they leaving something important behind? Should they be preserving the traditional dress and the traditional architecture? A lot of people often have a lot of questions about that. And there are a lot of people in the community also have a lot of questions about that. And it's like an ongoing conversation in the community. We don't really see ourselves as having like, if someone asked my opinion, I would be happy to give it. If one of the artisans asked me, no one ever has though. So I feel like we generally have let them lead on that. And we don't go in and say, don't change your houses, don't change your clothes. But we do say like, look, and they know, we don't even have to say, but they know that like when tourists come, they're really excited to take their pictures. And so they, they also know that that's part of it. But it's really how they want their culture to change is really kind of in their hands.
We have a question from Sandra. What is the motivation for change? Does it come primarily through the television?
I would say it comes primarily, the motivation that we really see is ease. Like if you have a tin or a tile roof, you don't have to replace it every year or two. And you don't have to hike, 5 miles to get the grass and dry it out to make the thatch. It's the same thing with the clothes. You can get warm, good clothes that you aren't weaving. You can have a bathroom. You can have a concrete floor that it's not dirt, making mud in the winter. And yeah, I think the main, there's a lot of, I would say, influences, maybe TV. I don't think TV is a huge one, at least that I've seen. I don't think a lot of people don't have TVs. They're expensive, and electricity is expensive, but definitely, what you see in the towns when people come down to town. But yeah, I would say that like modern convenience is the main motivation. And I think when you see it like that, it's kind of like, well, to me, that's like, well, I mean, we're not going to tell them not to, like, that is up to them, I don't want to live without running water. Like, so I don't feel like we should be, because, we get that question, like, what is our role in cultural preservation? Because that is when we started, that was part of it, like giving the women and the ability to stay in their communities and weave, like perpetuates weaving. And people were leaving weaving, and they were leaving natural dyes because it wasn't economically, before the modern economy and the cash economy really arrived to these villages, like it was barter based, and weavings were basically currency, and they could trade them for food. And when that started to shift, which was only maybe like 20 to 40 years ago, then they really started to leave weaving and leave natural dyes, when synthetic dyes became more available. And so when we started, and when our predecessor project started, it was really to get them to keep weaving and to like revitalize the native designs, and to to reincorporate the use of natural dyes. And so that is definitely part of like our identity as an organization. But at the same time, like a lot of the times our work leads directly to shifts away from traditional culture. And I think that our philosophy has been that we are really just like giving them choices, and like working with them to give them the choices that we hear that they want to have.
Yeah, so exactly. And I think it's something that you wrote about, cultural sustainability as well, for our website, that, culture is always evolving. So how we sustain that culture will always be evolving in a way as well, right?
Yeah. And I've seen some questions. Sandra's asking, or Eric is asking, how big is the village? The villages that we work with we work with one village that's like 150 families, another that's 500, another that's 1,000 families. And then will they soon be using synthetic dyes because of the ease? They've been using synthetic dyes because of the ease for like 100 years, but only recently, like in the last 10 to 15 years, have they started using natural dyes more. And that is because of the tourism, because the tourists love the natural dyes, and they love the naturally dyed weavings and the look of those. And so there's actually been a huge revitalization of natural dyes and natural dyes knowledge, because there is now an economic demand for that. I would say like 20 years ago, they'd almost completely stopped using natural dyes in the communities.
And even with our brand, we've only come back to natural dyes this year with a capsule collection. Before that, we were also just using industrially dyed yarns because of the customer demand. Does anyone else have any other questions? Or maybe Kennedy, if you want to explain the projects that we're doing right now, and the scale of things, and especially after COVID, and how that's impacted the work and the organization.
Yeah, I would be happy to do that. I just want to give a little bit of a longer pause to see if before we move on, to see if there's any other questions about, the dress or the natural dyes, or any of those other topics that we were kind of just talking about before but I'd be happy to move on if everyone's ready. I'm just going to wait a minute.
I'm very happy for you to carry on with the conversation, but just further up the chat, we did kind of talk about the symbolism a little bit, and you said we can address that or we can unpack that a little bit in the conversation. But absolutely, take the route that you want to in this conversation. It's just really, really interesting to be sharing this with us. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Erica. I did forget that we had talked. I think someone had asked whether the symbolism changes on the products that they make for themselves and the things that they make to sell. And there are a lot of things that change, yes. And there are other things also that are different on the things that they make for themselves and that they make to sell. So symbolism is one of them. I don't know if you saw on the Yikya there, and I can, the sun is like changing, and now it's in my eyes. But one of the artisans especially had Yikya, and that's the traditional shawl with like these huge, very elaborate animal figurines. Those are so time consuming. And a lot of them were traditional images. So you saw like there was like a biscacha, there was probably a llama or an alpaca. There were a lot of different kinds of birds. They'll do specific native birds. There was an elephant, which I have never seen before. That was awesome. You can see they're like changing, they're changing their designs, and we see some of the younger artisans weaving words into their Yikya because they're learning to read and write in school. But the designs that they do for themselves tend to be much more elaborate and much more figure based. And so specifically in the valley where we work, it's one of the only places in Peru where the designs are anamorphic. So they're actually like weaving images. In most of the rest of Cusco area, at least, they're weaving more like geometric designs. And those designs have really deep symbolism, as do the figurine designs. But the designs that they make for themselves are these really traditional designs that are often conveying like pretty significant ideas or meanings. So one of the Yikyas, as you saw, had kind of like a zigzag line on it, which you see on a lot of the weavings. And that is Mayu, or a river design, right? But it's not just like a river. It's actually like a specific river. Sometimes it's the river that's through their community. A lot of the time it's the river that goes through the Sacred Valley, which in Inca culture and in the Quechua cosmovision is like a very important sacred river that's actually the mirror of the Milky Way, which is the river in the sky. And those two, the Mayu can mean both the Milky Way and also the Vilcanota river that goes through the Sacred Valley. And so it's, every design has these layers of meaning. And one of the things that they say about the pre-colonial Quechua language was not written. The Inca were one of the most advanced civilizations in the world to not have a written language. And they really think that like the weavings, they use that as a way to like pass down histories and tell stories and communicate ideas. And so these designs have like so many layers of meaning. Like just you could take one design and just look at it 10 different ways. And they don't do that on the weavings that the things that they're selling. You see a lot more simple designs and geometric designs, things that still have meanings. Like you see that Mayu River, but you don't see elephants, right? You don't see like the Vizcacha or like this really specific bird, because those are so much more time consuming. And so that just really doesn't, if it takes twice as long, you're not even getting any, you can't sell it for twice as much. You can't even sell it for anything more because the tourist is like, there are these two nice weavings. Like they're not willing to pay more for the more elaborate designs. And then the other thing you see is the dyes. So the things that they're making for themselves, they always use synthetic dyes. It's easier. They're brighter. They, if you hang a weaving on your wall inside, the natural dyes are not going to fade. But if you're outside every day working on your farm, then yeah, like the natural dyes are going to fade a lot faster than the synthetic dyes. So for all those reasons, they use synthetic dyes. And then at Awamaki, the weavings that we buy from them are a few different kinds. So they do they weave whatever they want, usually using natural dyes, to sell directly to tourists and the tourists that we send or bring up to their villages. They also will weave specific designs that we ask for our wholesale collection that we sell here in the United States, and also to some extent in our store in Peru. And those are designs that we work on with them that come from their designs, but we have worked with the designer to adapt them to a more international market. And those products, with those, we'll actually give them like a picture and say, like, this is what ultimately what the weaving needs to look like, and it needs to be this big, and these are the colors, and here's the yarn and the right colors and all of that. And so we're providing some direction on providing a lot of direction on some of the textiles that they're making to sell to us, and others that they're selling to tourists or that they're selling for our store in Peru that isn't being exported. They make in the colors and the designs that they want, if that makes sense. So they make a lot of different, where they're selling it, who they're selling it to, can really affect the materials and the designs in the products. There are a lot of questions in the chat that I have not been reading.
So Sarah has asked, apart from tending to the animals, do the villagers have other sources of income that they are balancing with the time they have available to make natural dyes or do the weaving? What choices do they have?
Oh man, that is a really good question. And that has changed so much with COVID. Yeah, so they have animals and they have farms. All of the families that we work with practice some kind of subsistence farming. Most of them live at an altitude where pretty much what they can grow are tubers. Some can also grow a little bit of corn or carrots, but for the most part, they are at 10 to 14,000 feet of altitude. And I do not know what that is in meters for everyone who is not from US. I won't even guess. But it's really high. What?
I think it's about 3,000, between 3,000 and 3,500 meters.
Okay, that sounds right.
Yeah.
So they are farming, and those potatoes are really important. I mean, they eat those all year long. And then they also, yes, they have animals, although a lot of animals don't do very well at super high altitude, like having a lot of chickens or pigs is not necessarily an option. That sheep do pretty well, and the alpaca is a really important economic activity. So many of them have large herds of alpaca, and they'll shear the wool. And sometimes they keep that wool and they spin it. Sometimes Awamaki buys it to have it spun by one of our other cooperatives. And most of the time they sell it to intermediaries who buy it and then sell it to like huge alpaca corporations. And so that's another one of their activities. And then tourism. Tourism is really the biggest one. And that's what's changed so much with COVID. Is before COVID, almost all of the men in the villages worked on the Inca Trail as porters, or sometimes in other treks, and they would be gone from the village for really long stretches, especially in the high season, which is the Andean winter, like May through August. And the women were really kind of running the village and running the farms on their own. And then with our program, we also have started bringing tourists to the villages so that the women can access that market as well. And then that's another one of their trade-offs. And we definitely see like some of our groups that are really close to the valley and have more tourism opportunities because tourism is closer, are definitely can be less excited about big weaving projects because they realize they can make so much more from tourism. And some of our artisans who are really far away and don't have the opportunity to access tourism do a lot more of our weaving. Just for context, like I'm keep referring to the Sacred Valley, which is where we have our office in a town called Antetambo. Sacred Valley is a valley between Cusco and Machu Picchu, and it was kind of Cusco was kind of the capital of the Inca Empire, and the Sacred Valley was where the Inca did a lot of their farming and religious retreats and had a huge impact there as well. And then Machu Picchu is at the very end of what's considered the Sacred Valley. So our office is where the train to Machu Picchu leaves from. So it's really close to Machu Picchu. And then these communities are in a valley that's like perpendicular and above the town where our office is. And so they are maybe, an hour or two from the train station that leads to go to Machu Picchu. So really close to the tourism economy, but at the same time, like until, 15 or 20 years ago, there wasn't a road. And so in many ways, very far removed from the modern economy and modern Peru, but catching up very quickly.
So Sandra had a comment. I don't know if there's a question in it, but she said, I think a lot about the impact of fossil hydrocarbons. They are the root of transformation. Synthetic dyes and fibers, mechanization, fossil fuels speed up, create ease, make us quickly addicted to the ease that they offer.
Yes, that is true. I mean, we're all addicted to it. And also, like, I don't think that means that the artisans that we work with shouldn't have access to some of that ease. I think we all need to figure out a better solution. But yeah, that's a tough one. And it is completely true. I'm also addicted to water, which is quickly disappearing thanks to global warming in the Andes of Peru. So lots of complexity there.
Sarah's just posted another question. Do you get any pushback on the designs or colors that you request for your own collections? Do the artisans ever object or suggest changes?
That is a really good question. Yeah, so we have had some learning here. And that when we started, we were really just like, we would show up in the village and be like, we're here to buy some weavings. And they would be like, okay, here's some weavings. And we would just take them. And then we started like just getting all the same weaving, or, the artisans would sometimes like set up all their looms together and dye all the yarn together. And we get like 25 weavings that were exactly the same to sell in our store. And we pretty quickly realized that if we could work with them and to give them some design direction, or to get weavings in certain sizes that we could then turn into like handbags or other accessories, that we could sell a lot more and they could sell a lot more as well. And they have been entirely, I would say entirely on board with any kind of changes that will enable them to sell more weavings. If we were to say, just weave us a solid red block, they'd be like, okay, sure. If that's what they're going to buy, just weave us stripes, like, okay, whatever. They are very protective of their designs, and their designs are really important to them and a really important part of their culture. But I don't think they feel like they need to make them to sell to us in order to maintain them as part of their culture in a way that they want, if that makes sense. So they have always been really enthusiastic about design changes that will lead to more marketability on the international market. I think we've reached, at the organization, we've definitely, I think, had a lot of conversations about that, and like, what do we want our role to be, and are we changing the designs? Because sometimes, we've had designers come up with a design that we ask the artisans to make, and then we start to see those in their, in the designs that they're weaving for themselves, or the designs they're weaving to sell to tourists. The textiles that we aren't saying like, can you do this with this one design? They're using that design and putting it in other textiles. And, I think that we've definitely had conversations about like, is this what we want our impact to be? Again, like with tourism, I think where we land on that is like, they're seeing, like, they are people and artists, and they're seeing inspiration everywhere. And if they're see inspiration in something that one of our designers came up with versus a picture of an elephant, like they can weave what they want, like, it's not our job to isolate them. Like they are in charge of what their culture looks like, and they are like agents in this process. And so now I think we have a really good system. We work with a designer who is Mexican American. She lives in Mexico, and she is great at working with the artisans to draw from their designs. And she really starts with their designs. And then she thinks about how we can adapt those designs to a more international market. And then she'll often give them like a bunch of ideas that she's come up with from their designs and have them interpret those ideas or make samples. And then she'll sort of pick our final wholesale export designs from the designs that they've made. So it's like very iterative, and it really is rooted in them, but she sort of brings this like international eye and helps select kind of what is going to be what we can bring to market here most successfully, so that they can run a successful business and create the future that they want for their families and their communities, which everyone should have a right to do. And so that has really been our process on designs. And I feel like we're in a good place in terms of balancing like international needs with traditional designs. We do sometimes get customers who are like, can you weave this design that I came up with? And they're usually willing to do it. I would say those are not our most successful projects because I don't know why. Maybe their heart's not in it. Maybe it's just like not a design that's well suited for the backstrap loom, which has a lot of limiting factors. I will say the one time when we really had an absolutely terrible time with asking them to do a design that was not a traditional design was when you live and you learn. We would obviously not do this anymore, but this was maybe like 10 or 12 years ago. A client asked us if the artisans could weave a Shipibo design, which is a native group from the Amazon in Peru. And so we gave the artisans these Shipibo designs and said, this customer wants these, can you weave these? And they were like, sure. And then they just like wouldn't do it. Like they would be like, yeah, we're working on it. And like it wouldn't show up, or it was really terrible. And like it was like pulling teeth all of a sudden. And they a lot of passive resistance, and they never said like, this is not right. Like, we are not going to weave another Indigenous culture's design. These are their designs. We are not going to capitalize on that. Just like we would be horrified if someone else tried to make money off of our designs. But then we figured out that was a really bad idea. And like, we have never and would never do anything like that again. That was a learning moment. So that is the one time when they've been like, no, we're not doing these designs.
Yeah, I think there's definitely that real big sense of kinship and protection for your own. So I think I think Nada, your question has sort of been answered through that, I feel. But yeah, Nada asked, is the commercially sold product different to what they wear? So yeah. And Sandra says, could it be that the introduction of marketable designs a facet of the expansion of fashion?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think it depends on how you look at fashion, but I guess I don't really push marketable designs. Yeah, I mean, we are trying to enter, like, have sort of fashionable products. They are. We want to sell stuff. We live in a capitalist world, unfortunately. So here we are trying to do fashion. I'm looking in the chat a little bit. There are not patents. I mean, yes, this is a huge issue in fashion, right? Like, especially these big retailers who are just ripping off Indigenous designs with absolutely no benefit going to their creators, because how does an Indigenous community patent a design that they've been practicing for, a millennia? And we haven't really solved that yet. And apparently nobody really wants to. So I would say there are major issues there. We had a volunteer once who was a knitter, and she knit some mittens that had some of the traditional woven designs on it, and just sort of was like, thought the artisans would be like, that's awesome. And because she meant it as like really like respect, and like she loved their designs and she thought it was cool, she could adapt it to these mittens, and they were like furious. Yeah, so they definitely feel a lot of ownership, but there's not really a way that they could patent those. Are the children, and you can go to museums and see textiles that are 5,000 years old that have the same designs. Like, how can you patent that, right? So are the children in the film getting educated? Yeah, they were until COVID. They were all in school, and I think they are back in school now, but it was a tough few years when kids were not in school. They were trying to do remote school basically, but there's no like internet or cell service. And so the kids are getting assignments over like WhatsApp, you know, and some of their parents have phones, but not all of them. Mandish was actually there for a lot of it, and I was not. I don't know if you want to speak to more of that. I would say that all the tourism opportunities, like economically, what they, those options that they had in terms of trade-offs between like being home and weaving versus sending someone in their family to work in tourism, disappeared. And overnight, they really lost all kind of access to the modern economy, which they had, which is interesting because there are a lot of people in the community who still, you know, who lived at a time when they didn't have a road and they didn't have a school and they didn't have electricity. And so then all of a sudden, I mean, I guess they still had electricity, but like there was no market, there was no transportation, there was no, there were no jobs that paid actual money. And all of a sudden they were like weaving and subsistence farming again. And I cannot imagine what that must have been like when you have worked so hard to like bring your community forward and build a better life for your children, to have all of that just disappear. Especially the kids not being in school, like you saw from the video, the families care so much about that. Mandish, I don't know if you want to speak more as to what that was like.
It was a scary time. I was in Peru in 2020, and everything just shut down, and it was really quite isolating. I mean, not for me as much as it was for the communities, because yeah, like you said, Kennedy, transport stopped, you know, also the local government pretty much stopped connection between the communities and the town, because they didn't want COVID spreading into the communities where they didn't have the resources to handle that. So yeah, it really was very isolating for the communities themselves. And yeah, I remember my neighbor even explaining to me that she was trying to teach her kids over WhatsApp during that time. So it was definitely a really really difficult period. And we're finally starting to see some hope, I think, if I can say hope, this year.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So we've had a long journey to recovery, but I think we've had a lot of really good support. So Awamaki started a food donation program. Kennedy, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, so I think, you know, through a lot of the work that we've done, you know, asking the artisans how they're spending the money that they earn through our programs, food has always been the #1 thing. And so when, you know, when everything shut down in March of 2020, and Peru had actually one of the most extreme reactions, like they shut down, they were so on it. They were like masks everywhere, completely shut down everything, like overnight. I mean, people were like traveling and they were going to Machu Picchu, and all of a sudden, like within 24 hours had to get to the airport because the Peru was like, we're not doing any more flights in or out. You know, I mean, it was incredibly, you know, they were incredibly aggressive, and unfortunately still had the worst death toll in the entire pandemic, in the entire world for the pandemic. But now I've gotten totally off track. Oh, the food relief. And so we were like, okay, well, this is, you know, this is really extreme, and how can we support our artisan partners when there isn't tourism, which is kind of the bulk of their earnings and ours. And then here in the US, you know, a lot of our the people who buy their products from us are mom and pop brick and mortar businesses. And so they were also affected. And so it was kind of like all of the many sources of income that the artisans have and that we have sort of stopped overnight. And so we decided to do a little bit of fundraising to try to do some food deliveries, because that we really knew that that was going to be where they were kind of hurting the most, because we knew that's where they spent the money that they earned from selling weavings. And so yeah, so we just did like a GoFundMe, and we ended up attracting some like bigger foundations, and we ended up raising, I don't actually know how much we've raised in all. Oh, probably close to $100,000. And we've ended up doing, we'll do in all almost 3 years of food deliveries. And that's like a basket of just food essentials like eggs and milk and oil and rice and sugar and salt. And we were doing soap for a while too, matches, laundry detergent, and doing a basket a month for each of the artisan families that we work with. So that's was about 163 families. So that was not something that we as an organization would see ourselves typically doing, but ended up being, I think, a really important way that our artisans were able to get through. And also, I think for us and for the artisans, it was like really important to have this feeling of like, okay, the world is not like completely abandoned and for, all of these partnerships, all of these relationships like this, these like economic relationships that we've had for those to just disappear and just like, oh, sorry, like pulling down the hatches, like everyone each their own, like it felt for me definitely. And I think for the artisans too, like we haven't, those relationships haven't completely forgotten us, right? Those partnerships still exist. And so I think both for morale and also on a practical level, that was an important way that we got through, definitely, and the artisans as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, for me personally, because I work in the sales side of things, but we had to shift entirely online as well during COVID. So, we always used to call ourselves more of a tourist organization, but through COVID, because tourism completely shut down, we had to rely mostly on our product sales, and shifting all of that online and going through all of that transformation as well has been quite a big learning as well. Does anybody have any other questions? I am aware of the time, so we have about 10 minutes.
I just want to say it was really amazing. Like they were really touching films, and the artisans just seemed so proud to be presenting, their culture and their work. And it was really nice to see that, like, that focus on them and the focus on their hands and everything they were doing. And they were just so like enthusiastic and really excited to share their work. And it's something that I think we rarely get to see, that level of pride in their work. And it was really authentic the way it was delivered as well. And I'm really glad to hear that the kids made it to school. I don't know why that really was, she just seemed really, the lady, in the first film seemed really, this was like her goal, that she wanted them to be educated. And you'd said that I think the first film was like 12 years old, and I just didn't, 5 years old. So yeah, sorry. I don't know why. I just kept thinking, oh, did they ever make it to school? Yeah, I think, it's amazing. The whole project is. And I really like that you've managed to kind of find that really difficult balance of, what we can market from a culture and what is still sacred and separate, which is a really difficult thing to do.
Thank you.
Hi.
We are doing our best. Yes, that is a special family, the one featured in the video. Those kids will definitely, I mean, they are back in school. They will definitely keep going to school. Those parents are especially determined. Yes.
We've got a question from Sandra. What are your further aspirations?
Oh, that's a good question. So our big aspiration right now is we just bought a big piece of land in the Sacred Valley. And one of the things we've seen in our tourism program is that the tourists, that we work with often, you know, they really have to dedicate like a whole day of their vacation to come up to the artisans' villages. And many of the artisans that we work with don't live in villages that are accessible to the tourism market because they're too far away. And artisans that we would like to work with also. And so with the land that we bought, our hope is to create a space where the artisans can have their own space to host tourists on the valley floor. And so people who, you know, so women who live really far away can come down, you know, a couple days a month if they want to host tourists there and to access the tourism economy, the tourism market there. And then also so that tourists who, you know, most tourists who come to the Sacred Valley are, you know, 7 to 10 days, and they have a pretty rigorous schedule, and most of them are not taking a whole day to kind of travel up to an indigenous village. And so by having space that's on the valley floor a little bit closer to the highway that goes from Cusco to Machu Picchu, our idea is to be able to access more tourists and to you know, people who are kind of just passing through can come for an hour or 2 hours instead of taking a whole day. So kind of opening up the market that the artisans we work with have access to as well. So we just bought the land, and now we're trying to figure out how to build something on it that we can use for this purpose. But that's kind of what's next. A lot of and then also in that space, you know, having our own space would allow us to produce a greater variety of products to eventually possibly have different kinds of machinery and a bigger store than we have now. So opening up our access to markets as well. The tourists come mostly from the US and Europe. So I think that's most of it. We only have about 5 minutes left. I don't know if there's anything else. Thanks for all the great questions.
Yes, please do visit our website and check out the products. We also have a lot more information about the projects that are ongoing.
Yeah, I'm gonna type my email into the chat in case we take volunteers. Anybody ever wants to come to Peru as a tourist, as a volunteer, if you can think of some way you want to get involved, then we are here.
We have professional volunteer programs as well, everybody.
Always looking for staff that want to live in Peru and work with artisans and their designs and our production. So yeah, come and visit. All right, well, thanks everyone. Should we turn it back over to Erica?
I was just going to say thank you so much for sharing and welcoming us into that world through the film, but also just through this conversation, and just being open to kind of like these are the questions. How does one set of fashionings, I mean, this is the Global Fashioning Assembly, and we're kind of sort of thinking about how does a set of fashionings from one space become more accessible, more, yeah, maybe that's what you're trying to do, is become more accessible to others, become valued, shifting these kinds of power dynamics of whose fashion is valued in the world. So I think with that, really, really thank you for spending the time with us, and thank you, Mandish, for introducing and closing the global fashioning project with project in the Peru.
Thank you.